Today we'll be talking about defining token flow. So just really quickly about who Envision is and what we do. We are a blockchain systems integrator. We have services that are really on all different scopes within the journey of your blockchain projects. So whether you are just learning and you wanted to educate through a series of workshops, we offer those from blockchain immersions, use case analysis. We call something like a discovery day, dashboards in a day, decentralized identity management. We really try to do the full scope, especially what's relevant to this topic is blockchain tokenization and standards, all the way through the actual development services that we offer our customers. So from developing proof of concepts and different MVP development rollouts, gathering functional and technical requirements, from smart contract development all the way through front-end mobile and web UI UX development, as well as once solutions go live, we do help with support as well. So we leverage a whole series of different technologies in order to provide end-to-end solutions, from IoT devices to integration of line of business applications. We'll show you something that was leveraging trusted compute a little further on in this presentation. Infrastructure as code, of course, Kubernetes, Docker containers. It's all part of the orchestration and the deployment of these type of solutions. But just to give you a little bit of idea on ways that you can partner with Envision Blockchain. So this webinar, as I said earlier, it's going to be packed for the next 30 minutes. We're going to talk about essentially the agenda of this is we'll be talking about a little bit of a recap from last month's webinar. If you didn't happen to join, we'll give you a preface as to what this particular topic is about. So we're going to cover token definitions, business use cases within tokenization, some of the typical application stack and deployment considerations that we've thought about. And then next, we're going to be talking actually about token flow. And then lastly, we're going to present to you a business case where token flow was definitely considered and how it could be that you can use this kind of framework to use for yourself. Just one point is when we are going to be talking about token flow, there are certain elements about blockchain that we won't be talking about. So we won't be talking about the actual blockchain itself. It's to be assumed. We also won't be talking about any wallet software or anything like that. So that's also to be assumed. We're strictly talking about token flow, and we'll discuss that over the next couple slides. So again, just providing a recap into what we discussed last month as a good segue and transition into this next piece. Essentially, tokenization, we believe, is this transforming of physical items into something digital. Of course, you can always tokenize something that's already digital, but we're seeing a lot of this transforming of physical to digital. Within this token taxonomy framework that we spoke about before, there was this concept of putting a name actually to all these different pieces. So putting a name to the base of your token, whether it's fungible or not fungible, putting behaviors to it. Are you going to be able to mint it? Are you going to be able to transfer it? And we're going to go into that. So if the words that I'm saying don't make sense, don't worry about it. We're going to explain it all. We're going to talk about the different property sets as well, and then the ability to classify the asset. So essentially, it's like you're holding a diamond in your hand, a physical diamond, and you understand that this is a diamond, and you know what you can do. You can actually give it to somebody, you can transfer it, you can probably destroy it, you can burn it, something like that. But when you make it digital, how do you actually put definitions to that from a business perspective so that later on your developers can actually go ahead and develop the code to follow the business rules? So for that, there was this token taxonomy framework hierarchy that was developed out. There was a lot of thought being put into it. And essentially, we talk about the hierarchy where we spoke about the base, where there was your fungible or non-fungible tokens. Then there was, you can either make them, for example, within fungible tokens, you can make them divisible or whole. And in non-fungible, you make them transferable, non-transferable. And if you keep going down, then you see the different use cases, for example, that can come from there. So for example, if we follow this hierarchy and we start at the base and we go to the left side, we go to fungible, Then we go to divisible, and then that could be, let's say, variable inventory, and then you get to fiat currency, like the US dollar or the peso, for example. If you go to the right side, you have non-fungible tokens, and then maybe something that is non-transferable and that is singleton, and that could be a representation of a vote, for example. So you can start to think about this hierarchy as a way to start to define these assets that are around you. And in the previous webinar, we also talked about what are the business use cases. So the title of last month's webinar was Enterprise NFT Use Cases. Everyone was talking about digital art, for example, as it hit the mainstream. And there was a lot of inquiries that Envision got on what are good business use cases for NFTs. So we just put some thoughts right here in the presentation, and we spoke about, so for example, you can think of a diamond. For example, a diamond or natural gemstones are unique. And for that, they could be an NFT. And we went into more specific. I'm not going to spend all that time on specifics because we're here to talk about token flow. But generally speaking, is that the all the attributes and the properties of the natural gemstone makes it an NFT, and you can turn that from physical into digital. Of course, there's art, as you could see in the second icon, and that, as that has hit the mainstream with the selling of the digital art. There are unique pieces of art. There's only one art work, right? There's only one Mona Lisa, for example. If I were to paint a picture, there's only one of that. So that's an NFT. Documents as well. Documents counts as an NFT. For example, like an invoice, it's specific to one piece of work, to one customer, or maybe if you were to write a paper or something like that. That's a very specific document, and the documents can also be NFTs because they're not interchangeable with each other. There's also a concept within sustainability, for example, ecological projects. So there's identity that relates to ecological projects out there. So whether you're building wind farms or you're doing solar projects or you're doing carbon projects, there's identity around there, and there could be multiple owners of that project, but not one project is not interchangeable with another project. So therefore, you can also attach the concept of non-fungible tokens to that specific use case as well. And then on top of that, there's also, for example, diplomas or driver's license IDs. Those things are not interchangeable. If I got a diploma, that's not interchangeable with any other diploma out there. So it's very specific. So again, those were examples of non-fungible tokens. We also talked about the application stack of your token application, if you will. So you have your app stack, you have your deployment considerations. What we did was we actually took a look into an NFT marketplace, for example, OpenSea. We broke down how that would look like. So there was your front end, which is typically out and built out like in React or Angular or something like that. You have your back end, which in this case was IPFS was being used, but there's also SQL or Python or Node or whatever you want that to be. Then you also have your smart contract library. So for example, OpenStack was leveraging the ERC 1155 or ERC 721s. But we also took a look at other blockchains out there. For example, Cadence with the Flow blockchain. That's another smart contract with tokenization that could be used. Then there's the cloud platform. So when you're deploying your application and you want the web app or the web services to be accessible, you want it to be hosted in a secure cloud. So there's Azure services out there, AWS, Google Cloud, etc. So where does token flow actually fit in? On the left-hand side, you have your business use cases. And on the right-hand side, you have your app stack, you have your deployment considerations with your front end and your back end and all the blockchain stuff that's in the middle. Token flow sits somewhere in between coming up with the business case and actually developing the actual application, because there's really two schools. There's business and then there's IT. And if you're from the IT side, there's the common misconception that you're just going to run right in and start building technology. Or if you're from the business side, you're going to talk about the business all without any regards for the technology. So when we're talking about token flow, to us, the way we're defining token flow is just like this. So we believe that Token flow talks about the rules of this ecosystem. It talks about the token life cycle. It talks about your token design, right? Because not every use case is going to be the same. And there's different processes and flows that happen. So if you take a look at this image that's on the left, you start at the circle, then the circle moves to this diamond, and then the diamond moves to another circle, and then the circle moves to the square, and that's typically the end. So we think about workflows, we think about the life cycle, and essentially this is the rules of the ecosystem. So this ties very heavily to what we were talking about before with this token taxonomy framework. In it, what they did was they defined all these token behaviors. And there's all sorts of different behaviors, from attestable to burnable and compliant, delegable, divisible, encumberable, fabricate. I'm not going to read all of them, and you can read them here. And this is going to be recorded, and we're going to edit it, and we're going to put it for you to watch on demand. This is a really excellent way to start to define what your token should do in the digital ecosystem, because you can program just about everything and anything that you think should be done, but not everything and everything should be done. There's specific behaviors that these token behaviors. So for example, I'm just going to go through a couple of them to give you an idea. So when we talk about attestable, right? So attestable, it means that certain tokens will want to prove something like ownership or validation of an issued proof from the token from applications wanting to check attestations, right? So for example, if you got a diploma, maybe you wanted to be attested by the university that had issued that diploma. So you're going to want to develop that behavior in there. So to talk about these sort of behaviors gives a good way for businesses and the IT team, the development team, to be able to talk about it and actually put their minds together. I'm going to read a couple more of these just so you get a good idea as to how these behaviors are actually implemented. So burnable, right? This is a very common design within tokens, is you need to make them burnable. What does that mean? Is when a token is used in a certain way, you may want to remove it from circulation or from being used again, like maybe a loyalty point or something like that. Compliant is another one. So a regulated token, something that's regulated, needs to comply with several legal requirements, especially KYC and AML. Delegable is another good one. For example, you may want to have the support of the delegation function of certain behaviors to another party or account to invoke them on behalf of the owner. We're going to talk about that in the business use case, but delegable is if you want something else to own the right to make that action for that token behavior, right? Divisible is another one. It's the ability for a token to be divided from a single whole token into different fractionals. Encumberable is one where you would want to have restrictions preventing certain behaviors like transferable or burnable from working while it's being encumbered. A good example to think about this is a property title's owner may have obtained a loan from a bank first in order to purchase the property. Mintable is something that you'll see. Again, it's another very common one where it supports the issuing or the minting of new tokens. Plausible is also very important. Plausible is used to influence the behavior that can be applied to other behaviors in a token. Plausible applies to a token class that implements this behavior. It will halt the trade and free all transfers. And it's handy, for example, if there's a bug that's found in the token implementation. Another one that's common is redeemable. So this behavior only applies to unique tokens. Redeemable tokens can no longer be spent. Redeeming a token removes an asset from the business network and guarantees that it can no longer be transferred or changed. Same thing, you can make the definition for a role, right? The role is that a token can have behaviors that the class will restrict invocations to a select set of parties or accounts. If you have role-based permissions, for example, is common in applications, We can do the same thing with role-based token behaviors as well. And transferable, same thing. You can probably guess that it allows you to transfer ownership from one party to another. You get a good understanding here is that there's a ton of different behaviors for you to think about as you go through your business use case. Some of the token behaviors and code that we've seen in the past, it's very simple to go ahead and look at these functions. So if you were to look at a very simple type of token lifecycle where there's a mint functionality, a transfer functionality, and a burn functionality, you're going to find this across many different blockchain networks. So here we have the mint function in the upper left in the ERC 1155, which is in the Ethereum network. If you look to the right-hand side, upper right corner, Cardano just recently announced the functionality to support their native tokens. So there's also the transfer functionality that's built there. And then Hedera also put out a Hedera token service not too long ago. They have a very robust set of different APIs to interact there. So essentially there's the burn function. So there's something there really to be leveraged in many different blockchain networks within your token use case. Now that you understand that little bit about business rules, now let's put it all together, right? It's a very basic process that we believe that you start by asking questions, you identify what the process is, and you gather the answers. So for example, to show you an example of something that we did in the past was within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance when we developed out the trusted token in collaboration with a couple other organizations that are also part of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. But long story short is that there was this use case within the Trusted Execution Working Group, and we wanted to showcase the ability to provide an incentivized participation of Enterprise Ethereum Alliance members and their organizations and their employees in EEA, SIGs, and the working groups. So there was around 10 different smart contracts that we leveraged. And within there were 3 tokens that we leveraged. So there was a reputation token, there was a reward token, and there was a penalty token. How do we come up with this kind of business rule within all of the different token behaviors that we just described? There's a lot of token behaviors to figure out. But again, I'm not going to go into this. This is pretty long, and you're more than welcome to go ahead and take a look at this on-demand video that we're going to post afterwards, and you can freeze frame this and you can screen grab it and all that. And this is open source. So you can go ahead and take a look at the link in the lower left, and you can copy and paste the entire thing. But as you start to go through with your stakeholders and you're describing to them and you're asking questions and you're figuring out what is the business rules that you think about, for example, is that you think about, for example, in the first row, the question is who controls a token grant, when, how, and where, right? This is an exercise that was conducted in the early phases of this token design. There was the process, which was sharing, and then here's the answer. So who? So there was the EEA SIG and the working group chair on behalf of the EEA, right? So that's where the delegation comes in. When, anytime, how, settling and adjusting grant values where, no specific location that's required. And you can go through all these different questions, and basically you want to start answering the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how, and you can then refer back to all the token behaviors, map all this out, and then pass that on to your dev team to actually implement the behaviors that match the answers. So who does it go? When does it go? How does it go? And then you can start to sequence out some of these token values or some of the token flows that we were discussing. So for example, this is like a simple one, right? You can start looking at it from left to right. So the grant is created for each organization contributing to an EEA working group or special interest group. The chair or co-chair will create the grant request from a template form indicating the reward amount, organization, commitment description, commitment outcome, the organization's contributor with expected contribution percentage equal to 100%. So this is the initiation of the reward for doing something. This is how they wanted to incentivize through tokenization. And then the reward amount represents the total positive total positive rewards that would be minted into both reward and reputation tokens. So you could see on the next slide right here, the chair would then issue, right? He would mint, they would create the tokens, and that would create the redemption token that would go to the organization. And then that would also create the reputation token that would go to the individual that was actually contributing to that. And I'm going to show you the demo of this in a second from a user interface perspective, not necessarily down to the code level. But again, just getting into the smart contract architecture of that use case, as we were saying before, that there was about 10 different smart contracts, but 3 of those are the token smart contracts. So there's the penalty token, the reputation token, and the reward token. Just to describe a little bit about the behaviors. Remember, we were talking about the behaviors. So for example, there was one of the behaviors that we wanted to incorporate, which was the mint behavior. So you can see where the first line says function and operator mint. That was the actual creation of the tokens into the specific application. The reward, you could see that the reward had a couple different functions that we discussed in the behaviors before. There was the mint, there was the send, there's the transfer, and then of course, and then the penalty token, which actually you still have to mint it. It would create one, but when it created one, it would actually take away a token from the total wallet balance. That's just a way to start at the very high level. We're talking about the entire token behaviors, moving things from physical to digital, and then obviously creating the sets of rules to match the behaviors, and then again down to the code level. This next demo is a video of this application. It was presented during DevCon 5 a couple of years ago. I think it was like 1.5 years ago or something like that. It was the last DEF CON that happened. And I'm going to go ahead and play this. And I'll describe some of the things that's happening. So essentially, as it's playing, see, we're logging in as an admin. The admin then is adding the organizations to the registry. There's no tokens yet. Okay, then logging in as the organization, we're adding the employee because the employee is also going to get a token. So we're adding the employee of the organization. No tokens yet. Smart contracts, yeah, but no tokens yet. And then the organization is added to a working group. The employee is added. They're going to say what the employee is going to do. They're going to assume that the employee did something. The admin minted tokens, and there you go. You see that the tokens are there. They can be redeemed. They're going to go ahead and redeem the token. We're going to just wait a second. And we're also going to share tokens in between different organizations. We're going to wait for the admin then to sign in. They're going to approve the redemption. There's a couple tokens. They're just redeemed. And then that's basically the end of the flow. Again, recapping what we were talking about with regards to token flow, it's essentially a life cycle of a token. So what we just saw is that tokens were created, they were transferred, and then they were redeemed or burned out of the circulation. That's, again, a really quick way to describe what token flow is, how it relates to businesses and different organizational uses. And we really appreciate you staying in this webinar here and hearing us out. So I'm going to leave a couple minutes to see if there's any questions over here. I know I went through this kind of quickly, but again, I really appreciate you taking the time and hearing us over here. As always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us at info@envisionblockchain.com. Like we were saying in the very beginning of the presentation, we have all sorts of different workshops to learn about tokenization, to help guide you through how you can tokenize different assets within your organization, where tokenization makes sense, where it doesn't make sense. I'm happy to walk you through that. You can feel free to go to our website at www.envisionblockchain.com. or feel free to give us a call at 800-513-8334. More than happy to hear from everyone.